What if the head of America's most powerful military force in Africa was quietly pushed aside, not because he lost a battle, but because he lost a story? Just a few months ago, General Michael Langley made headlines across the continent, not for freeing any region, not for ending a war, but for one careless statement accusing Burkina Faso's president of hoarding gold for personal gain. That comment didn't just spark anger, it sparked something deeper, a continent-wide fightback, mass protests, and hashtags like "Our Hands Off Burkina" and "Our Respect Traoré" exploded across social media. AFRICOM was forced to defend itself, not from an armed enemy, but from the very people it claimed to protect. Now Langley is out, replaced, retired, some say politely removed. In his place, the Pentagon has picked Lieutenant General Dean Anderson, decorated, disciplined, silent. But as Anderson steps into his new role, one truth hangs over his appointment. He is not walking into Africa. He's walking into a battlefield already strengthened politically, militarily, and emotionally by the one man Langley looked down on, Ibrahim Traoré. In this episode, we're going to break down what Anderson is walking into, why Traoré may be more dangerous to AFRICOM than any armed militia, and how one African president turned public anger into a national defense plan. Stay until the end, because once you see how this battlefield was prepared, you'll realize AFRICOM isn't just losing territory, it's losing control. General Michael Langley was once celebrated as a historic appointment, the first black commander of AFRICOM, a symbolic shift for a force long criticized for being too disconnected from the continent it operated in. But symbolism only lasts so long, and in Traoré's Africa, symbolism is nothing without independence. Langley's fall began not on the battlefield, but in a Senate hearing in Washington. Seated comfortably in front of U.S. lawmakers, he made a statement that would light up fury across the Atlantic. He accused President Ibrahim Traoré of using Burkina Faso's gold reserves to secure his own power. It was a comment made without evidence but filled with suggestion, painting Traoré not as a reformer or a revolutionary, but as a corrupt leader in camouflage. The reaction was immediate and strong. Burkina Faso's streets filled with protesters, not against their president, but against the American general. Signs that once read, "Down with terrorism," now read, "Down with AFRICOM." In Ouagadougou, demonstrators burned American flags beside French ones. On social media, Langley out and Traoré's Africa trended for days. For the first time, AFRICOM found itself not just unwanted, but actively rejected. Inside Burkina Faso's cabinet, the statement was deemed an unfounded insult to national dignity. Government officials called it a clear attack on the country's independence. Analysts in West Africa described it as planned suicide. Langley had done what warlords and extremists couldn't unify the public behind Traoré with a single sentence, and yet he doubled down. In later interviews, Langley attempted to justify his remarks, saying AFRICOM was deeply concerned about resource misuse and authoritarian drift in the region. But no one was listening anymore because while he spoke of authoritarianism, Traoré was visiting rural provinces, rebuilding military outposts, and giving speeches to young volunteers training to defend their villages. Langley failed to understand something basic. In the Sahel, the right to rule is earned on the ground, not granted by foreign generals. By May 2025, internal pressure was mounting. Pentagon insiders leaked rumors that Langley had become a problem. Diplomats warned that his presence in Kenya during the African Chiefs of Defense Conference would hurt regional trust. When he arrived anyway, Kenyan civil society groups publicly protested, accusing the U.S. of sending the wrong message to Africa. It was no longer a matter of if, but when. On June 3, 2025, Donald Trump, seeking to clean house ahead of his second-term defense agenda, announced that Langley would be replaced by Lieutenant General Dagan Anderson. The official statement framed it as a planned realignment, but everyone knew what it was: damage control. Langley's fall is more than just the exit of a general, it's the collapse of a story that AFRICOM could operate as an invisible hand in Africa, free from scrutiny and beyond accountability. Traoré broke that illusion, not with bombs but with pressure, not with hostility, but with unwavering defiance. This fall didn't begin in a war room. It began with a microphone, a careless phrase, and a continent that had heard enough. Lieutenant General Dagan Anderson is no stranger to high-stakes command. A seasoned planner, a decorated Air Force officer and director of the Joint Staff, on paper he's everything Washington wants in a cleanup man. But the theater he's entering isn't normal. It isn't Iraq, it isn't Afghanistan. It's Africa. And this time, the war isn't just against rebels. It's against a story that AFRICOM has already lost. From the moment his name was announced as Michael Langley's replacement, Anderson became a symbol not of hope, but of desperation. A last-minute attempt by the Pentagon to patch up a crumbling reputation. He inherits not a command center, but a battlefield littered with distrust, and the biggest threat isn't a rogue militia, it's Ibrahim Traoré's plan of independent defiance. Unlike other commanders before him, Anderson walks into a continent where more and more leaders are rejecting external control. Traoré didn't just expel French troops, he rejected the entire framework of Western military dependency. His message is spreading, amplified by the alliance he helped form with Mali and Niger. The AES isn't just a regional pact, it's a firewall against everything AFRICOM stands for. Anderson's first problem: access. He cannot land troops, conduct exercises, or establish listening posts in Burkina Faso. The government has shut the door. Even worse, they've locked it from the inside, backed by a public that now sees American soldiers not as allies but as intruders. In previous missions, AFRICOM relied on quiet partnerships and soft agreements behind closed doors. That plan no longer works in the Sahel, not when every base, every meeting, every handshake can trigger protests and social media firestorms. His second problem: no story. AFRICOM's counterterrorism label used to offer political cover, but under Traoré, people are asking harder questions. If AFRICOM has been in Africa for 15 years, why has terrorism only gotten worse? If its goal is peace, why does it need drone bases and watching networks scattered across the continent? Anderson will need answers, not for Washington, but for a young generation of Africans who are no longer satisfied with vague promises. Traoré has already framed this new phase as a war of the right to rule. The unfortunate truth for General Anderson is this: in Africa today, the right to rule is earned in the villages, in the dust, in the eyes of the people, not in PowerPoint slides at the Pentagon. The third problem Anderson faces is visibility. Unlike the early years of AFRICOM, when most operations occurred behind closed doors and under minimal scrutiny, the game has changed. Every move now is tracked, taken apart, and broadcast across African media spaces, from community radio in Bamako to influencers on TikTok in Ouagadougou. AFRICOM's image isn't shaped by press releases anymore. It's shaped by people. Anderson's arrival is likely to be framed not as a fresh start, but as a continuation of a broken legacy. That legacy, to many, includes drones flying without consent, intelligence sharing with questionable regimes, and planned silence during human rights abuses committed by allies. In the age of digital resistance, even one misstep could light up a continent-wide fight back. The fourth and perhaps most dangerous challenge is what Traoré has already built: a fully working political firewall. His administration has woven anti-AFRICOM feeling into national identity. His speeches frequently invoke independence, dignity, and the right of Africans to defend their soil with their own hands. These are not hollow words, they're policy. They've turned Traoré from a transitional leader into a symbol of anti-imperialist resolve, and symbols are much harder to topple than prey. For General Anderson, this means one thing: he is not dealing with a man, he is dealing with a movement. What complicates matters further is that Traoré has inspired others. Leaders in Mali, Niger, and even Chad have begun echoing the same words, questioning the right of Western military footprints in their countries. It's no longer just about Burkina Faso, it's about a regional awakening, unless Anderson can rewrite AFRICOM's role in that story. He may find that every diplomatic meeting is a dead end, every training offer is refused, and every overture is interpreted as imperialism. Anderson might have the rank, he might have the experience, but in this new era of African assertion, it may not be enough. Because in the minds of millions, Africa is no longer seen as a partner. It's seen as a ghost of a colonial past that Africa is finally ready to bury. Before Dagan Anderson ever received the call from the Pentagon, before Michael Langley ever stepped into that Senate hearing, Ibrahim Traoré was already preparing for this moment. While AFRICOM focused on drones and briefings, Traoré was building something harder to detect. A plan, a system, an independent war plan designed not for tomorrow's battle, but for this decade's war of influence. It began with his military restructure. Within months of taking power, Traoré launched the creation of specialized units known as the Rapid Intervention Battalions. They weren't just soldiers. They were political symbols, uniformed proof that Burkina Faso no longer needed Western trainers to defend itself. By the end of 2023, more than 20 such units were working, trained under a local plan, equipped by new partners and deeply loyal. Next, Traoré redefined the idea of national defense by arming the people. Tens of thousands of civilian volunteers were organized into the VDP, Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland. These were farmers, students, shopkeepers trained to defend their villages, monitor movements, and serve as early warning systems against infiltration. It was grassroots security built on pride and participation, and it sent a clear message. Burkina Faso would not wait for foreign soldiers to show up when danger arrived. Then came the AES alliance. Traoré, along with leaders from Mali and Niger, signed the Charter of the Alliance of Sahel States, not just as a security pact, but as a declaration of political defiance. The alliance excluded France, ignored NATO, and set up joint mechanisms to share intelligence, coordinate troop movements, and unify doctrine. It was more than a treaty. It was a firewall, and it worked. Since its formation, the three governments have successfully repelled multiple insurgent advances. AFRICOM watched from the sidelines. To Traoré, this was the plan all along. Win the war not by firing the first shot, but by closing every door before the enemy ever arrives. When Anderson lands in Africa, he won't just find closed bases. He'll find a closed system, a network built by a man who understood that post-colonial liberation isn't just political, it's planned. And for the first time, an African president has shown that independence isn't claimed in speeches. It's built layer by layer in battalions, alliances, and belief. The brilliance of Traoré's trap isn't just in what he built, but in what he refused. While international powers rushed to offer aid, training, and planned partnerships, Traoré, he asked a simple question. What is the cost of dependency? He understood that every Western advisor came with a contract. Every joint exercise required political compliance, and every watching agreement handed a piece of Africa's independence to a satellite orbiting above it. So he said no to AFRICOM, to France, and even to ECOWAS, whose threat of sanctions fell flat in the face of national unity. Instead, Traoré turned eastward. He opened the door to new alliances, not just with Russia, but with Turkey, Iran, and others willing to treat Burkina Faso as a partner, not a pupil. These relationships weren't driven by ideology. They were driven by leverage. Traoré didn't ask for protection. He asked for tools, weapons, drones, and equipment, the means to protect his own soil, his own way. This shift sent a signal far beyond the borders of Burkina Faso. For decades, African nations were told that Western military cooperation was the only path to stability, that without AFRICOM's guidance, they'd fall into chaos. But now, a new reality was taking shape. One where countries like Burkina Faso could forge their own paths, train their own forces, and reject the presence of foreign boots on their ground. Traoré doubled down with his messaging. State television ran documentaries on African empires that resisted colonization. School curriculums began highlighting independence and regional unity. Civil society was mobilized not just against terrorism, but against external control. In towns where AFRICOM once coordinated with local forces, murals now depict resistance fighters standing over maps of a united Sahel, fists raised high. And yet, for all this defiance, Traoré has been careful not to declare war. He doesn't need to. His battlefield is psychological, diplomatic, and cultural. He knows that the true victory isn't in destroying AFRICOM, it's in making it irrelevant. By the time General Anderson takes his seat, the structure Traoré has set in motion will already have done its work. The bases may still exist, the uniforms may still be pressed, but the influence, the access, the unquestioned authority, gone. This isn't a revolution fought with rifles, it's a revolution fought with refusal. What happens when a military machine meets a wall it cannot climb, cannot go around, and cannot break? That's the question facing General Dogan Anderson. AFRICOM has always operated with the assumption that access is power, that if it could place enough bases, train enough soldiers, and build enough intelligence links, it could influence the continent from within. But today, that playbook is crumbling. The wall Traoré has built isn't made of steel or concrete. It's built from rejection, planning, and an entire generation of Africans who no longer see American boots as liberators. In Burkina Faso, AFRICOM is not just locked out physically, it's locked out emotionally, symbolically, and politically. Every attempt to re-engage, whether through humanitarian assistance, joint drills, or ECOWAS initiatives, has been met with resistance. Economic offers are met with skepticism, with protest, with refusal. Because AFRICOM isn't just a command center anymore. It's a symbol of something older, something darker, a reminder of promises made and broken, of alliances formed and exploited, of security forces trained and then turned into pawns for someone else's game. And now, with Traoré's plans spreading, Anderson finds himself not in control of a region, but on the outside of a movement, one that's growing, one that's proud, one that knows exactly what it's saying when it says, "We'll fight for ourselves." So when AFRICOM meets this wall, it won't fall, it won't retreat. It will, for the first time, be forced to admit the battle is not just on the battlefield, it's in the minds, the streets, the stories. And right now, AFRICOM is losing them all. So where does this leave us? Michael Langley is gone, Dogan Anderson steps in, but the battlefield hasn't changed. Because the real battle was never about who wears the uniform. It's about who writes the story. Traoré understood this from the beginning. He didn't just resist AFRICOM, he rendered it obsolete through planning, symbolism, and unapologetic independence. He built a defense that no missile could penetrate. Public will, regional unity, and the belief that Africans can and must defend Africa on their own terms. In just 3 years, Traoré went from a transitional military leader to the architect of a new continental plan, one that replaces dependency with defiance, one that turns training grounds into cultural battlegrounds, one that teaches every young Burkinabe that security isn't something given, it's something built. And as Anderson takes the reins of a command system in crisis, he's not just tasked with rebuilding AFRICOM's credibility. He's staring down the barrel of an idea whose time has come. Because when people believe in something bigger than fear, when they reject old alliances in favor of new dignity, and when they look into the eyes of a general and say, "We've got this," that's when you know something has changed. This isn't just a story about military command. It's about the soul of a continent. If you believe Africa deserves to define its own future, share this video. If you've watched this far, drop a comment below. Do you think AFRICOM still has a place in Africa, or is it time to shut the gates for good? Because one thing is clear. The next chapter won't be written in Washington. It'll be written in Ouagadougou.